And we are recording. Bob, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty, guys, as you can see, we have one of our black belts, Bob Hamrick, here with us today. Welcome to another episode of Get to Know Your New Breed Black Belt. So Bob is one of our OGs, yet another one of our OGs, one of our oldest students that came over
Ooh.
from us. I was gonna get that. I was like, it came over with us from our Evanston days back when it was UltFit above those lakeside cleaners, right next to White Hand Pantry. And
White Hen, yes, and Philly's best.
yes, Philly's best. First and foremost, let's just kind of get this over with before we even talk about your background. What is your over/under on the amount of ussing that's going to happen during this call?
Oh, when we return, it's over. I can't even put a number on it. Potentially infinite us.
All right. So many of the guys from New Breed Training Center already know you. They might also know that you were in charge of, basically the head of Roots Training Center, which recently, because of this whole pandemic and stuff like that,
Right.
basically just kind of chose to postpone operations for indefinitely. But a lot of people don't know who you are because you've been away from New Breed Training Center for quite some time, for a decent amount of time, where you've popped in, of course, during open mats and here and there and stuff, and classes that you could make, and when you run privates at New Breed. But most of the people don't know your story. So let's start right there, Bob. Tell your adoring public us about your story.
Us.
Get it?
About my origin us story.
Yeah.
Well, my buddies got me into boxing, and I started out at Warehouse, which is like this small boxing gym up off 9441. And it was run by a guy named Al Falcon, and he had a couple good trainers there and a couple good pros and amateurs. But as time went on, I ended up leaving and training and competing for another gym, which happened to be UltFit. And that is when I first saw all of you guys doing jiu-jitsu in this tiny little room at the time with like a cracked mirror and a couple dings in the wall. But growing up, it was the same with you guys. We watched guys like Van Damme and Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee and like Steven Seagal, and we'd see all these really cool moves through movies and on shows, and it was something like that always interests me. Like grappling always looked cool. Like you'd see judo in the Olympics, wrestling in the Olympics, but other than boxing, there wasn't really any access to it. So I remember Dave at the time. He introduced me. I bumped into you guys out front. I was going to White Hen, yeah. I mean, the rest is history. I was really nervous being the boxer, like coming in and training against all the grapplers. I guess like in my own head, I thought they would have it out for the boxer, like, oh, we have something to prove. We'll shut this guy down. And little did I know that it was like completely the opposite. And once I started getting my butt kicked by 145, 150-pound Filipino dudes on a day-to-day basis, I really took jiu-jitsu, a lot more serious and gave a lot more respect. Just because it was like the proof was in the pudding. It was very effective. These little guys, and had me questioning how a 180-pound boxer with over 10 fights at the time is having trouble with these little guys just hanging off of his limbs. But in addition to that, it was, I could really get a feel for the camaraderie and like that team feel from you guys off the get-go. And really that's, it's never changed. And, people tell me about their training stories, and, sometimes it's hard for me to relate because I've only known one team and one gym. I've been very fortunate. I've never had a reason to leave. Everyone's always been straight with me and, very supportive, but also like has pushed me, as, all of us, especially in the beginning and now more so than ever, we all have a bar for ourselves, right? We want to meet certain expectations, both in life, but in training. And, guys at New Breed have always pushed me to become better, on and off the mats. And, that's where I met my wife through you guys. Basically, she tried a class there on the same day. I took a sick day from work to work with Eddie for the first time ever. So like I met Eddie and my wife on the same frigging day in the morning, or actually around lunchtime for, I think it was Colin's Muay Thai class at the time. OG Collinator. when he was teaching Muay Thai at Skokie. But yeah, I mean, like, I've just been with the team ever since. Again, I've had no reason to leave. It's been it's been a pleasure to train, and a privilege, really, now that I understand like more of the community. You know, and you see guys like, you know, I think Chicago's very lucky. We have a team like New Breed, and you have like the guys at Serafin and Valco. Like, we have guys who are actually, you know, established in the community, but they're also like decent people. So that helps jiu-jitsu grow, and in turn that helps us grow. And yeah, I don't know. Started teaching. You gave me the opportunity. I think it was at purple belt, late purple, and then around brown belt, teaching jiu-jitsu classes and some boxing classes at the newer location where everything is at now. And you know, things come full circle, and you know, I'm going to be back helping out, and you know, Eddie could be fighting again here shortly, and you and I will be back, you know, cornering behind the octagon cage and screaming Scott Jorgensen at Eddie and Scott Jorgensen. Yeah. But I think, you know, again, it's been an awesome ride, and one that I've enjoyed every step of the way, regardless of injury or, you know, like setbacks, whatever you want to call them. But, you know, jiu-jitsu and the team has always really been there for me, and it's cool to see it grow. And cool to see like it grow in the state of Illinois and all over the country, you know, being like tag team, you know, having Gutta and Shannon and all these guys, like especially Watson and those dudes, Jared, obviously, Leighton, like everyone all over the country. And it sounds like the world too. So, you know, we've got a little bit of our flavor all over, and it's cool that, you know, we can all kind of share that experience together.
That, I mean, that our network's pretty vast. It's pretty vast now. It's a good opportunity for any one of us, whether it be me, you, any one of our students, to be able to branch out and cross train with a whole bunch of other people here, especially here in the United States, Texas, if you've ever been to Texas, and so forth and so on. So let's kind of back up just a little bit. So pretty much you told me, well, you mentioned that you met Eddie and also Jamila, your wife, on the same day.
Yes.
Okay, so basically what you're telling me is there's a 50-50 shot that you could have married Eddie or you could have married Jamila Striker. 50-50.
I could have married Eddie Wineland, but, you know, Jamila spoiled it for me. Sorry, Eddie.
All right. But see,
thanks, Amber.
I remember my first experience with you. Obviously, I met you right outside the cleaners. And then I remember I was training for – it was basically my last MMA fight. The last one that I actually fought. And that was all the way back in it was actually a little bit after 06, I think. 06, just give or take. And Dave at the time sat there and said, "Hey, you should go box with Bob." I'm like, all right. So I had just met you like a week before, a couple days before, maybe a little bit before. And Dave was just like, "Go box with Bob." So I remember it was you and Artur in the boxing room,
Artur, yeah,
with me going in there. And I remember first going with Artur, and he was just Mike Tyson
like a little badger.
Oh yeah, just like beating me up on the inside. So I just started just double legging him. It was just supposed to be boxing. I just started double legging him. I was just done with it. And then the next round, I went with you, and I just remember I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So you're just doing this, and then you started doing that thing where you started fainting, like doing your little machine gun thing, and I was just like, oh shit, like I'm dead. I was like, I'm gonna get hit so hard. I'm donezo. I don't want to deal with this. And after that, I don't think I ever boxed with you ever again, to be honest with you. I was just like, nah, I'm good. I'm good with that. I'm good with that. What was your favorite Evanston memory?
Oh, at the gym?
Or or in general, that time.
At the gym? Oh, man, I have so many, but I think a lot of them are like, you know, MMA, it's interesting you brought up that moment because MMA was a lot different back then. You know, like when you and Cyril were fighting and like Quan would fight random dudes at Joe's on Weed Street. Like,
Nick Sim too. Don't forget about Nick Sim.
Yeah, you know, like, Nick Sim too. Like early Nick Sim. But, you know, like it would be just guys who kind of knew some stuff here and there, and you would throw them together and you get the best of like every world, and then you would have to do your best against that, I guess. You know, there's that mini cage in the corner next to the jiu-jitsu room where, you know, like John Lee would go in there, like when Cyril was getting ready, and like you and I would go in there. You know, just a lot of training was my favorite memories. Just, you know, it's the same, but it's different now. You know, training was a lot harder back then, but now I think people have done a good job of being able to provide all types of training for all different types of people, and not just like that, you know, like crazy train that we ran for a little bit at Evanston. Like some of those like MMA workouts would be like us throwing around kettlebells till we puked and like doing burpees and like shots. And but hey, man, I wouldn't trade it for anything. That was really good training. But yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It was great, man. A lot of great memories, you know, training. But one of my favorite non-training Evanston memories is we went to Soundbar or something for your birthday, or like a celebration or something.
Okay.
Like I couldn't get in because I was wearing like New Balances. Like I had nice shirt, I had nice pants, but I had New Balances, and they wouldn't let me in this club. So Cyril's like, oh, okay, I have a spare pair of shoes in the trunk. And I said, okay, great. And I'm like, well, I'm a size 12 and a half. I'm like, do you have anything that'll fit? He's like, yeah, these will be fine. And he pulls out a pair of like size 9 dress shoes. So I have to cram my feet into these little shoes, and I'm like flopping them around like slippers. And then I ultimately just was able to get in, and I like flung my shoes off, and it was a funny night. And Isbeck and I were there, and we were a little tipsy, and we sobered up really quick because we thought you'd disappeared, or like someone had like picked a fight, and it turns out like Mike Kong like took you back because you were like a little too drunk. And
that was after
everything worked out, but it was like a funny night. And the old rock and roll McDonald's.
Yeah, I do remember that night. I do remember that night. That was an interesting. Well, I do remember the first portion of that night. It was actually my last MMA fight. That was my last MMA fight.
Oh, okay. I think it was
the
one
post
of those.
celebration
I
of
think
that.
I found some pictures from there too. It was,
I don't want to see them. I've seen pictures from there. I don't want to see them ever again. That's not a fun time. I do. That is our former life.
A lot of great memories, man. I mean, when you're younger, you have all that energy, and you can stay up that late. Like, man, I'm done by like midnight unless you and I are playing or something.
But so as a lot of the guys know, you started a Roots Training Center, and Roots Training was up in Round Lake. And again, it recently you guys recently chose to discontinue operations right now, pandemic, everything like that. And you know, and we'll continue those operations at a later date. What, like, yeah, for me, I always saw you as a teacher and someone who, well, you were a teacher. That was your trade, before you actually went full time to jiu-jitsu. So I always saw you as a phenomenal teacher, phenomenal with kids, and just like born to do it and stuff. Born to do it. My question to you in regards to Roots was, why didn't you do it any sooner? Because why didn't you do it any sooner? Because you were ready to do it for a while back. I'm like, what's what a better question would be, you know, what's your favorite part of running a jiu-jitsu academy and stuff? There you go.
Oh man, I mean, like being from education, I was used to like all these day-to-day things, you know, like a list of things you would have to do, like the busier aspects, and you know, like note taking, info taking, and communicating with others, and it's just like you're being part of a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of my favorite aspects of like having that program, like being a part of Roots, and you know, whatever in the future is like getting satisfaction not only from training, but like helping other people get it. You know, when I see the light bulb go off over their head, and they can, hey buddy, when I see the light bulb go off, you know, that tells me like, okay, cool, I'm helping this person invest in themselves. Like this person is like learning something, they're staying in shape, but also like it's that feeling of like accomplishment, you know, like you can see it on people's faces, and from there, like everything I think grows. Is when you feel better about what you're doing individually, you can help other people feel better about what they're doing or trying to do. You know, like you would always say you're only as good as your training partners, and like the way that I look at that is far more than just technique, you know, and you guys have stressed this as well, but you know, like you'll get advice from guys that maybe you haven't heard, or a perspective from guys that you maybe have not have heard, whether it be about life or technique. But there's so much that goes on like behind the scenes, in addition to just like teaching technique, you know, like managing people, like getting them to understand someone else's perspective if they're having trouble, like, we basically have our Elvis equivalent up at Roots, and like, not everyone understands like different cultures. And I think what's so cool about martial arts is it brings all these different people together under one roof, and all for a shared interest. And I think it's cool that like you can get other people to kind of like, see see like all of the differences and also the similarities between themselves and people of different cultures and races, or whatever you want to call it. But I think that's the greatest gift that like martial arts or boxing or anything has to offer, is that it can really bring everyone together and doing stuff that's really, really fun. And I mean, great for you, and God forbid you have to defend yourself. Like, I feel sorry for whoever is attacking you, but I think it's like that teaching aspect and like watching people get it so they can give back. I would say that's probably my favorite aspect of doing all this. I don't mind like the paperwork. I don't mind the social media stuff and like the pictures. I actually like doing that. But, it's dealing with the people and helping them find their path on this journey. Jiu-jitsu obviously is more than just a workout, regardless of what you want to use it for. I think there's so much to take away from it. And I love boxing more than anything, but I put jiu-jitsu just above it in the sense that even though it's an individual sport competition wise, like the way like things work as a team and as a group is just different in jiu-jitsu schools. At least that's how I feel, just because like everyone really is looking to get each other better, and like the camaraderie that you feel on a jiu-jitsu team, I feel is much different than anything you'd find in like a boxing gym. But yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it, but I think like you and I do it because, we love the sport and we love like what it can do for people. But it's like you allow people to give back. So it's like paying it forward twice. I feel like this stuff is great for everyone, and it can be used for a number of different things, like treating anxiety, PTSD, lowering blood pressure, whatever it is you want to use it for. I mean, even becoming a world champion and maybe making a living. But, there's so much that it provides for us in the community. I just hope that, we can kind of get back to things sooner than later, so we can continue to help and share what we love doing.
Yeah, don't we all? You touched on something, and I find it so absolutely positively true. It's honestly, whether or not you teach jiu-jitsu or not, or whether you run your own jiu-jitsu academy or not, as long as you're involved in jiu-jitsu in a good, healthy training environment, you learn to communicate with all different types of people, all walks of life. Jiu-jitsu is such an intimate sport, and there's so many. Everyone that trains jiu-jitsu comes from so many different backgrounds. You'll have you'll have the engineer, the politician, the actor, the college kid, the wherever, all different.
Yeah, the custodian, the librarian, the CEO, like the doctor, like everyone is on the mats, and you don't know what anybody does.
Exactly. Everyone's
wearing a gi.
Everyone's wearing a gi. Everyone's getting after it. Exactly. Everyone's getting after it, and everyone's just all having a good time. You just don't know. It's a really wonderful thing. It's a really, really beautiful thing.
Yeah. What a concept, right? We can all get along.
And then you have MMA. Let's talk about MMA. Let's switch over to MMA.
What happened?
MMA, as many of you guys know, both Bob and I are the coaches for Eddie Wineland, along with Jason Gussick, and formerly Keith Wisniewski as well too.
I hate Jason Gussick so much.
Along with Jason Gussick, and we are fortunate enough to be able to coach Eddie Wineland, to corner Eddie Wineland, and get free Reebok gear. And we used to
and look ridiculous while wearing it.
We look ridiculous. It's true. It's true. And
hashtag Reebok. Just kidding, bro.
But what is your favorite Eddie moment?
Oh man.
Or I think MMA UFC moment. Like we can frame that question any which way you want to. Go for it.
Man, I think my favorite fight of his was Scott Jorgensen. Only because that entire trip was so amazing, but it was a close fight, and like the way he came out and finished the fight was just incredible, and we were all screaming, and we lost our voice after that. I mean, what a performance. and even from Nick Mitria from the crowd, like we all chimed in. It was such a great fight. But the Barral fight was great, man. Like that first round, I mean, I'm sure you would agree. We thought he was going to walk out of that thing with a belt. But God, there's just so many great moments. Like the Toronto trip for Barral was, that was a great one. And but
beautiful
I
city.
think he's undefeated in Chicago, right? 3-0.
Undefeated in Chicago. Undefeated in
He
Chicago,
really?
unless you count the first fight. Well, undefeated with us. He did one fight in Chicago where he fought Rani Aya.
Yeah. That
Before
was
he
like
joined up
the
with
fight
us.
that like sent him to us.
Yes, the fight that sent him to come train at U-Breed. For me, one of the moments I remember is when you first started training Eddie. There's two Eddie moments. The first one was you were sparring with Eddie, and I think he was trying to hip bump sweep you or something to that effect, and he cut your eye. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Cut your eye. Is that your eye or cheekbone? Yes, we were in Skokie. And
yeah, it was my cheek. That was real nasty.
And then, it was nasty. It was a nasty cut. And at the time, and I joke with everybody about this too. Bob I always tell them, like, yeah, Bob's like the nicest guy. He's the super nicest guy. And what you guys don't realize is that, like, no, he's better with this. But before, when he was still a full-time teacher, he would be the nicest guy and, great training partner and everything. But if you touched his moneymaker, if you touched that face, he would try to hurt you. He would try to mess you up because he's a teacher. He can't go to work with a jacked up face and everything. And we would always warn everyone. So it's funny because I remember that moment. You got cut, and you knew immediately you were cut. You just knew it. You just looked at it. You looked at the blood. You're walking towards the restroom, and you just turned and fired on the poor drywall and put that big old hole. It was about this big, like as big as my head. I got a big head. It was right through the drywall. And the funniest thing is, like, literally everyone stopped because there was a jiu-jitsu class at that time, and everyone stopped and looked at it. And I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow you to the bathroom. And I sit there and I look, and I see that you missed the stud by that much.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh God.
And that was like my wake-up call. I'm like, you know what? There are better ways of dealing with frustration.
We should probably
my hand, and then, like, who knows? Maybe I never would have been able to work with Eddie or anything. So
yeah, like, I mean, like,
it was a funny memory, and yes, poor drywall indeed, but a lesson that I'll never forget. Like, hey, dumb A double dollar sign, you almost just shattered your hand on the side beam because
But I had another Eddie story. I just honestly forgot it and stuff. But, like, there's a lot of fun Eddie, like, moments. Like, when I say Eddie stories, it's really traveling with Eddie,
like
and
team stories. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's just like,
I mean, like, think of how many Keith stories there are. My God, just in the fetal position on that handicap sign in the parking lot is like tattooed in my brain.
Of an Olive Garden. There's pictures of that somewhere. It was an Olive Garden.
Running from alligators in Florida on the way to Steak and Shake.
That was me. So I was serpentining my way down the street, like, in the middle of the night. That was then the one time I didn't make your first. Was it the first Toronto trip where Eddie fought Campazano? I didn't make that trip.
That was to Edmonton, or
was it Edmonton? Was it Edmonton?
Yeah, I think it was Mitria and I. Mitria and I met Keith down there with Jason, I think.
Yes, and up there. And I didn't make that one. All I know is that it involved McDonald's, a ball pit, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I just heard.
Yeah, that was so bad. That was we went to a McDonald's, like, at 2 a.m, and, like, the playpen was closed. But Keith had some some drinky poos and
refreshments.
He was determined to get into the kiddie play place at McDonald's, and so he did just that. And this poor woman who was working the register, oh, please, sir, we're closed. And he goes, oh, I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. I'm normally much worse than this.
I remember
he didn't, like, break anything, but it's like, you're drunk in rural Canada and you're at a McDonald's that you got to via shopping cart race. Like, things are gonna happen. But
Did they
That's what
serve
your 20s are for.
did they serve poutine at the McDonald's?
That you would have to ask Keith. I don't I don't remember.
The other thing I remember too, one of the last little stories about MMA and the Eddie trips was the one time we were all in Phoenix. But I believe it was Phoenix. Yes, it was Phoenix, and I was trying to jump on an earlier flight because remember there was sometimes you're at the mercy of whenever they charter the flights and stuff, right? I
Right,
remember
right.
our flight was supposed to leave at 5 p.m. and I did not want to be there all day long at the airport. So I remember getting up and I'm like, "Hey Bob," it was like 3:30 in the morning, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, "Bob, I'm gonna leave for the airport right now and catch this flight. Are you coming with me?" And you were just like,
Oh yeah.
"Oh, he's serious. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess I'm
Yeah.
going. Let's
You
go."
only had to tell me once, dude.
Yeah,
I was like, all right, let's go.
just
I
like,
didn't
yeah,
want to stay in
let's,
Arizona any
yeah.
longer than we had to.
Oh
No
yeah,
offense to Arizona.
I
Just
loved
kidding.
it. I loved it. I just wanted to get back home. Sometimes we just want to get back home. But he, it's if anyone, all the school owners out there, all the jiu-jitsu people out there, if you ever have the opportunity to corner professional MMA, do it. You might hate it. You might hate it, but you will
Yeah.
absolutely love the experience of it for quite some time. Like for a little.
Yeah, I would say
You gotta do it. You gotta do it.
everything leading up to the fight is probably the best. Like sitting in the locker room listening to a bunch of loudmouths yell the whole time is probably the least favorite part. Mike Perry, but uh, yeah, it's fun, man. And like you could argue the industry is changing and they're focusing more on entertainment, but I think there's still a really interesting competitive aspect of MMA, which I still really respect. Like we still have some of the greatest athletes and martial artists going against each other, and now in multiple organizations, not just the UFC anymore. It looks like Bellator has gotten much more competitive. ONE FC, a lot of the other organizations in Japan. So it's nice to see like MMA making like a semi resurgence because for a while it looked like it was just going to be McDonald's and that's it, but now you've got some other organizations coming around and
Right.
providing a little competition and like good competition. I mean, guys like Lima and Bellator, dear God, that guy is amazing. You know what I mean? Like there's some phenomenal fighters in Bellator that I think are on the level of UFC fighters, and I think that's only going to bode well for the sport of MMA, and hopefully that'll help guys like Eddie and beyond.
Did you ever did you ever have the desire to dabble in MMA and compete in MMA? Because you've competed in jiu-jitsu, you've competed in boxing separately.
Yeah, like absolutely. What was tough is like finishing up school and like training and then also working full time. It's like, dude, the level now is incredible. Like if you're not training every single day full time, like this sport is going to pass you up. It reminds me a lot of like what in like an old Hodger interview, I think he was talking about like the 9 to 5 guy could win worlds, no problem. But now it's like you have these guys who are training 2-3 times a day who will just eat you alive nowadays. So yeah, the passion is there for sure. Yeah. But yeah, it's just totally different now than it was before. But yeah, man, it's such an awesome sport, an interesting sport. I would never count it out, but for now I'm gonna stick with
Pass on that
jiu-jitsu.
for now. Nah, it's well.
No, I love the training. I mean, like we all trained and got our butts kicked and did some butt kicking and a new breed, but man, it's like your full life. I think that's why like I hope things get better for fighters in the future because it really is a full-time job, man. Like Eddie in camp is no joke, for you, for me, and especially Eddie. I mean, that guy is like a total workhorse, both mentally and physically for that specific amount of time with like no interruption. And, so it's incredible to see like what guys are able to do, but I don't know if I have, I don't know if I've got that right now. Oh, maybe now since all this downtime,
Right. But
punching some sand and concrete and getting myself ready.
But you anticipate yourself coming back to like the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament scene and the pro shows.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to compete as long as I physically can. I think like that's one really awesome aspect about jiu-jitsu is I think it's the most sustainable martial art. I don't, you could light spar in boxing and Muay Thai, no doubt, but there's just something a little different than there's something a little bit different with jiu-jitsu sparring than there is with any other sort of sparring, but
Right.
especially in competition.
Right. It's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is pretty. One of the pretty cool aspects about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that you can pretty much train at 100% clip, pretty much all the time, as long as you're physically capable of doing it. You can actually train at that hard clip and basically quit the round or the match anytime you need to, just by tapping, or just like
Right.
just kind of going from there. Which in boxing, sometimes I've done some,
Yeah.
I've done Muay Thai, I've done boxing. You kind of can't quit, and sometimes you're incapable of quitting because you just got rocked in the face, and your fight or flight is, or your fight rather, is basically telling you to just keep going forward and keep swinging.
Yeah.
The next thing you know, you are
You're like
out.
your own worst enemy.
Right.
It's like, no,
Right.
I'm okay. I only got popped a couple times. It's like, well, not exactly. You should probably call it a day. But with boxing, like, I mean, when I was competing in boxing, it was you sparred once a week and that was it. Like, if you were going to be healthy, but also if you were going to stay sharp, you shouldn't be sparring more than once a week, because then you're going into training and technique with like that sluggish mentality you get from taking, a couple blows to the head. And, in jiu-jitsu, it's like you could spar really hard one day and then you could take the next day and have an active rest training day and still keep your flow, keep your technique sharp, things like that. You don't always have to go hard. It is really fun, but at least, I feel like it's a little more sustainable and easier to do in jiu-jitsu than it may be in like boxing or even Muay Thai. That's not to say it can't be done, but I think it's much easier and more enjoyable, with jiu-jitsu, just because it allows for a lot more in terms of, what you're able to train and what you're able to do.
Let me switch gears in terms of the question. If you had any advice for someone who's been training jiu-jitsu for, let's just say they get past that first honeymoon period, that first 6 months, where
Sure.
they just only recently started figuring out what to do with their body, or basically they started developing that muscle memory, but they're still unsure of their game per se. What
Of their what?
of their game, of what they
Of
like
their
to do
game. Okay.
at the bottom or what have you. What advice would you give to them?
You know what? Like for me, I just stuck with things that I really liked doing. And from there, like a game will kind of start to form because you'll learn ways like, I remember your black hole or your like diagram theory where things would like branch off of
The
each
black
other and
hole
branch
theory,
into other
right?
things, you know. But I would say after 6 months, yeah, I mean, like for me, my honeymoon never ended, like if anything, getting my butt kicked motivated me more. But I think after 6 months, like of getting your butt kicked, I think the key is to like stick with it and remember like why you started. And from there, I think you can really start, basing a game around things that you like to do, because, there are a lot of concepts and moves that you could learn, but at first it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but if you stick to some things that you like doing in addition to some fundamental things that you really can't live without in jiu-jitsu, I think that'll help you not only on the road to blue belt, but beyond, like I think blue belt is a very important belt and sometimes underrated. But I remember it, it's kind of like we got our blue belts and it's like, all right, good job, keep going. And it's like, I mean, that's what it should be, like, celebrate your achievement and keep going. But by blue belt, you're really starting, I feel, to like grasp some jujitsu. Like you're starting to build a game and you're starting to understand how some things work. And, after 6 months of jujitsu, I think you're finally just starting to get a taste of that, like at first it's kind of fun getting your butt kicked, and then after a while you're like, man, I am still getting my butt kicked. But you're also like starting to learn some things. But I remember what I would tell people at Roots is like, you're not always going to be the noob. You know what I mean? Like you're a noob because you just started. You're a beginner because you just started. But if you stick with this for a month and somebody else shows up, you're no longer the new guy. Now you can take what you've learned and maybe help them at the beginning of their journey. Now, that's not to say maybe they can like, help them with their overall game, but they can certainly help as a training partner get them caught up and help them enjoy jiu-jitsu. But yeah, there's a lot going on after 6 months, man. I mean, it's like information overload. It's like this physical overload almost, but I'd say stick with it and keep training things that you find interesting or you like doing and maybe are successful doing, and then start to challenge yourself and develop from there. In addition to, these like jiu-jitsu rules of thumb that we really can't do without, right? Like the technical things,
Right.
like shrimping and like protecting your neck or like, elbow knee, stuff like that. But
Right.
yeah, it's an interesting time in jiu-jitsu, man. First 6 months, a lot of ups and downs, but always good. It should always be good, right? And like you guys have been saying, like you and your brothers from my first days. Oh, cool. In Evanston was like, everyone's talking like this 1% better every day is like this new thing, but you guys were like, no. It's like 0.01% better every day. Oh, cool. Just try and do something better every day.
I still appreciate it. Just try to learn one thing. Doesn't matter what it is, small detail.
Yeah.
You don't want to tie your belt, but just how to stand, how to stand a little bit like lower or whatever the case may be.
Right.
That's all it really takes. There's no secret. We just get on the mats and spend some time out there, and just have a good old, just have at each other and stuff.
Yeah.
In closing, let's start wrapping it up a little bit. In closing, is there anything that you want the New Breed guys to know? Other than the fact, if you guys haven't heard, if you guys don't check your emails and stuff, Bob's actually going to be coming back and teaching, be in charge of the striking program, be in charge of both boxing and Muay Thai for a little bit. And, that's just up until Roots is back up and running again. But Bob will be back for a little bit of time. And is there anything that you want to share with the New Breed Training Center students before we go? You shed a lot. You shed a whole bunch.
Yeah. I mean, guys, you're no different than,
He likes Dunkin' Donuts, guys. Get him Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes.
With lots of
I thrive on coffee. I'm a man of simple tastes, but other than plenty of ussing when you wake up and when you stretch and when you go to bed, but in all seriousness, like all of you guys at New Breed are no different than Mark and I or anybody else who's achieved, any colored belt or any sort of recognition or title, whatever you want to call it. And I mean that in that, like what I mean by that is we all have to follow the same rules, whether it's in jiu-jitsu, in life. Like I think we all are on the same page in that respect. And I think that's really, really cool because it keeps everyone on the level, right? Like no matter how good somebody is, they're still doing the same technique that you are. So no matter how discouraged you get or no matter how confident you get, like always remember that, like, just to keep it going and to keep some of those things in mind and, enjoy the journey. And yeah, be prepared to a lot more. Be prepared for Merchant and I to drive you crazy with old timey lingo and a little bit of the razzle dazzle, see? But other than that, I look forward to seeing everyone and helping out as much as I can. And I hope you guys know, and if not, then you can always ask me any questions. I'm not I don't know, not an ego weirdo.
No, Bob is
open for any feedback.
I was literally going to that right there. Bob is one of the most humble people in the game, and he's always willing to help each and every single person. Doesn't matter white belt, black belt, new person, what have you. He's always super willing to help. So guys, take advantage of Bob, so to speak, for lack of better terms. Take advantage of the time that you have with Bob, and if you ask him a question. And the thing is that, the beauty about it is that one thing that we've always encouraged, and Bob, you encourage this too. I've seen you, I've heard you. Everyone all the people who have any experience with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it doesn't really matter what belt, may have a different take on the exact same question. And we're all right. We're actually all correct. So guys, take advantage of Bob. He's a phenomenal resource. And Bob, before anything else, thanks for always being part of the team. Thanks for always having my back.
Absolutely.
And thanks for doing
everyone. Everyone at New Breed, you guys are super lucky. It's easy for me to look back, with 2020 vision, but you know, I'm glad I ended up where I'm at, and you know, I'm every day grateful and thankful to, you know, have a team backing me and have guys backing me like you guys. So it'll be my pleasure to help out again, and look forward to seeing everybody when all this, you know, all this dust settles.
Alrighty. Bob, thank you again for joining us. I am
Thank you,
going
Mark.
to stop the recording in 3, 2.
2, 1.